Think we clipped the mics. Oi. Dudes, Nate from the 8020 drummer. And today I'm coming to you once again from the studio next to the power studio. I'm just in awe of the power coming out of the studio practically 24/7. So today I want to bring you a lesson that's inspired by yet another kind of YouTube deep dive I was doing on the couch the other day. And there's this dude named Arthur L.A. Buckner who does a great lesson on Dilla. So just as I did a couple weeks ago with Austin Burcham in the time lesson, I want to yes and Arthur's lesson by jumping off where he started out with Dilla and just coming up with a few ideas to vary things up. So just to make sure we're getting on the same page, Jay Dilla was this rap and R&B producer who was famous in the 90s and early 2000s for taking a lot of jazz samples and making them into the most enduring beats of all time. And if you've listened to De La or Tribe Called Quest, you've definitely heard him. And you know, I think the Chris Dave diaspora of the last few years has really revived a lot of that stuff. And now you've got people, everybody from Perrin Moss, from Hiatus Coyote to Richard Spavin, aping the Dilla through the filter of Chris Dave. So that's a brief history, and let's talk about what Arthur was speaking about in his lesson. And I'm going to distill this. So essentially, if your beat template is just this, 3, 4. If that's your vanilla beat, then what Arthur talks about is that within this 8th note on the hat, there's a spectrum between maximally straight on one side and maximally swing on the other side. And by the way, annotation to check out Arthur's lesson, because credit where credit's due. I definitely want to send traffic to him. It's a great resource. So he does this exercise where he plays that beat starting straight and moves it all the way over to swing and then back to the middle. And that's great. So let's pick up from there and play the sort of prototypical Dilla beat with a hi-hat 8th halfway between straight and swung, which would be sort of like this. 3, 4. Etc. So the next thing Arthur talks about that you can do with that is if you play the bass drum straight, as if you're playing this. So your bass drum is right in the pocket with the 16th 32nd pulse, but then you're doing that halfway straight, halfway swung thing with the hats. Then it's gonna flam a little bit, so that'll sound like. Etc. So I want to jump off from there and introduce a few other variations that you can do with this. And one of them is something that I've seen both Perrin Moss and Richard Spavin do. So instead of playing you might hear Richard or Perrin do something like this. So in other words, they're incorporating that bass drum into the frame of everything being a little bit halfway swung. So I was doing something in 5. I'm not sure if this is tangential or not, but I like to practice things in odd meters because it forces my brain into unfamiliar stuff, like drawing on the right side of the brain. You draw a figure upside down so that you're not in your familiar patterns and that it forces you to think with the right brain, etc., etc. So this in 5. So one thing I like to do is to sort of let instinct take over. And if you're experienced with practicing with the metronome on off beats, if you actually switch the metronome to on beats, it's going to feel weird to you, and it's also going to induce you into this sort of Dilla halfway swung thing. So I like to literally just start straight without any 8ths on the bass drum and just let it land where it lands so that it's sort of the second nature thing. And I think that's along the lines of what Arthur was talking about. So in 5 again, 3, 4, 5. you can hear Nick Smith playing along with a John Witt track. It's one of the Soul Tone videos where he's doing that, where it's just super, super subtle. It almost just harkens a little bit to that Dilla feel, and that sounds super killing. So now some other variations you can do are to go more toward the crazy side of things and call attention to the fact that things are offset. So if the basic Chris Dave beat, again in 4, is then obviously, and last year I talked about this in my Chris Dave lesson, is you can play the 8th in exactly the straight spot, but then also catch the delayed 8th. And that's what gives rise to this. Etc., right? So then you're playing the left hand. And by the way, Chris sticks this differently. He goes, so he'll go right, right, left, right, right, left. I like to do it right, left, right, right, left, right. It just works better for me. You can experiment with those two, see what works better for you. So that's a classic Chris thing. And you can do that with both bass drum placements again. So here it is with the bass drum in the original straight 8th spot. 3, 4. And by the way, Arthur says you should move the hats lower in the mix, and given that he plays real gigs on this stuff, I'll trust him. So let me try that. 3, 4. Right, so that's super clean. The kick drum's right in the 16th, 32nd pocket there, but you can also move the kick drum over again so that it's in that implied frame. So 3, 4. Right? And then try not to be as tense as I am. Another variation you can do is opening the hats with the snare drum. That's a classic Chris thing. So you can either go, or you can go, so the last thing is this Perrin Moss variation, which is literally playing every hi-hat note offset. So instead of, you know, triple it, 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 that sort of thing with, actually it's not quite that swung, but that gives you an idea. He'll literally play very. Okay, so this beat, 3, 4. And you can open the hi-hat, again, right after the snare strike. You'll see a lot of examples of that in hiatus beats. So, etc. And there was one more I wanted to talk about. I think I just wanted to mention that the kick drum can, again, be in the original straight 8th, 16th, 32nd quantization, or it can be moved over with the implied beat. So in the original spot would be 3, 4. Right, so you get that flam there. It's so funny, in my instruction materials I'm teaching people 9 times out of 10 to not do that, but in this case you are doing it. But again, you can also move the kick drum over so that it's occurring with the offset hat beat. So then the only thing that's happening in the right spot is the kick beat on one and the backbeat, and everything else is offset. So that'll sound like 3, 4. Oops, I got it wrong. 3, 4. And one other thing that Perrin likes to do is go from, and I think this is actually hiatus in general in their songwriting, is that they'll switch back and forth between a totally straight 8th feel and then put like half a bar of Dilla in that. So I think the classic example of that is Building a Ladder, where it's like building a ladder of love to you, and I hope love you built one too. So badass. I'm going to link to it below. Please check out the video of that song, the live the live recording gives me goosebumps every time. So dudes, that is my yes and jumping off of Arthur's lesson about the Dilla beat. Those are some ways that I've seen other drummers innovating on the Dilla beat. And I think it's just a good thing to have in your wheelhouse because, gosh, you know, I think it's the go-to if you're playing like a really subdivided beat. And then all of a sudden you want to make the feel sparser, like maybe if the bassist is going right, so you're playing some kind of a funky thing, but then they switch to half notes. And the classic example there is the song Molasses. So you can be like, right? And don't forget your state of the art. Shoutouts, Brennan Scott. All right, dudes, that is my lesson. It ran a little long today, but had a lot of fun. Nate from the 80/20 Drummer. And as usual, if you want to dig deeper, if you're digging these lessons, but you want to get some structured instruction with me, I don't do Skype lessons, but I do something that's even better. I do a coaching course, which is only open for enrollment a few times a year, but is like 6 months of studying with me for around the price of 2 lessons, because I really want to help you guys at scale. If you want to get on the wait list for that, and by the way, if you want to get 3 free videos that are not on this YouTube channel that have a little bit deeper instruction with transcriptions, I like to say that they'll help you get better in the next 3 weeks than you have in the last 6 months. How about you click on the screen right here, head over to the link there, get yourself the 3 free videos to make your playing better in 3 weeks. Get on the mailing list for the next coaching course launch. Get in the game. So dudes, it's been fun. Nate from the 80/20 Drummer.